You know that feeling where your mind is just buzzing, all the emails, social media, and just your own thoughts whirring around yesterday, tomorrow
Oh
night.
yeah, it's nonstop, this constant stream.
Exactly. And wading through all that, trying to figure out what's important, what's just noise, maybe what's even, well, leading you down the wrong paths.
It's a huge challenge, maybe the challenge, really. Sorting the signal from the noise, both out there and, inside your own head.
Yeah,
That internal world can be just as chaotic.
it really can.
Yeah.
Which brings us perfectly to today's deep dive. We're tackling a pretty profound question, actually. It came from you, our listener, based on some really powerful excerpts from a talk by J. Krishnamurti.
Yeah, this isn't light stuff. It really asks you to look at the basics of how you think, how you
Yeah.
perceive reality. It's less about, say, learning facts and more about examining the whole process of knowing itself.
hmm So our mission here, tailored for you, is to unpack the central question that the text raises. Is it possible to have an attention that's so constant, so alert, that you can always see that very fine line? The line between using thought necessarily for practical life and where the images we build up start to create illusion and conflict. It's a big one. Let's jump in.
Right. And the material puts that question right out there, doesn't waste any time. It asks about this possibility,
Yeah.
this constant alert attention, and specifically why, to make that critical distinction
Distinction, exactly.
between thought that's, essential how we function day to day
Mm.
and the way our minds create these images that seem to, well, trap us or cause friction, conflict.
And it says right off the bat, this isn't something you just instantly grasp. It can feel difficult even to think about
Mhm.
because constant alert attention, what does that even feel like? Sounds almost superhuman.
It does have that feel. But to even start exploring it, the text first looks at the tools we actually use. It points out pretty simply that imagination and words, they're fundamental to how we operate as human beings. We use them all the time.
Okay, that makes sense. Words, obviously, for communication, for thinking things through, and imagination. Yeah, that's where it starts getting really interesting, isn't it? It feels so basic to being human.
But then the text immediately asks this really key question. Why do we create images? I mean, think about it. Images of other people, images we have of ourselves, even, sacred images, symbols in temples, churches, mosques, beautiful writing, works of art.
It really highlights how central image making is, whether it's something physical like a painting or just that picture you conjure up in your mind. How much of your own identity or how you react to someone else is based purely on these internal images you're holding.
And this connects directly to how thought works. The material asks, point blank, is there thought without words? Or are words just fundamentally part of thinking?
You know, when you try to watch your own mind, it really does seem like this mesh, doesn't it? Words, symbols, memories, ideas, all woven together, like our whole inner landscape is built on that network.
So, okay, if thought is so tied up with words and images, how on earth do we draw that line the main question asks about? The line between using thought effectively, necessarily, and creating images that just lead us into illusion or trouble.
Right. The text gives some examples of necessary thought. It talks about a carpenter needing skill and knowledge.
Or a plumber,
Oh,
a scientist. That's thought used practically, right? Building on what you know to actually do something.
exactly. You need to know physics to build a bridge safely or how pipes fit together so they don't leak. That kind of thought, that kind of knowledge,
Mm.
it's obviously necessary. The question isn't about somehow eliminating that.
No, the challenge is seeing the difference between that essential function and the kind of image making that creates conflict, illusion. And this is where the text really starts to focus on imagination. Yeah, it notes that imagination seems, well, vital for artists, poets, painters, sculptors, and it's their creative fuel.
But then comes the sharp edge. Is that kind of imagination necessary or maybe even helpful in just daily living? Or could it be maybe even just fancy, as the text puts it, that it actually stops us from seeing what's really going on?
That's a really critical point they're making. The text uses a very strong example. Fear. Let's say you're feeling afraid, but instead of actually looking at that fear, you imagine a state where you're not afraid, maybe, some perfect future moment.
Right, you escape into that idea.
Exactly. And that imagination becomes important because it's an escape from the reality of the fear you're feeling right now.
And living in that imagined, fearless state, the text calls that an illusion. It says it's not actual. And crucially, that escaping into the imagination actually stops you from looking directly at the fear itself.
Precisely. It contrasts this with giving your complete attention to the actual fear. The text suggests that when you look at fear, really look, with total focus, its whole nature is revealed. And that very act of seeing causes it to dissolve, to end.
Whereas trying to live in the imaginative escape from fear.
The text uses a pretty strong word for that. It calls it loony.
Loony. Wow, okay. So pretty direct, basically saying it's irrational to retreat into fantasy when reality demands your attention. The text also adds this interesting bit saying that maybe true art is just putting everything in its right place. And it notes how artists themselves often lead quite conflicted lives, contrasting that with this idea of inner order.
So it keeps circling back to this core question. How do we see that line between necessary thought and these illusory images? And to dig into this, the text brings up the idea of awareness.
It asks, are we aware, not just of, the world outside sound sights, but also our inner world, our thoughts, feelings, those sort of background attitudes and beliefs we carry? Are we actually aware of all that stuff moving around inside?
And then comes the really tough part. Can we be aware without choosing? Can you just observe that inner landscape without immediately slapping labels on things, good, bad, right, wrong, or trying to grab onto one feeling and shove another one away?
That sounds hard because, choice is obviously a huge part of life, isn't it? You choose a job, clothes, a car, good car versus bad car. The text mentions that. It acknowledges we need to choose on that level.
It does. But it makes this really crucial distinction. Psychological inward choice. That constant picking and choosing between thoughts, between feelings. Doesn't that actually signal confusion? The text suggests that clarity is the absence of that kind of inner battle. It's only when we're uncertain, confused, that we feel this constant need to select internally.
Huh. It's quite something. Clarity means just seeing what is, without that whole internal preference game. And the text connects us back to thought. You need thought to drive, to speak, fine. But maybe the choosing around our psychological thoughts, maybe that's where the problems really start.
Which leads us to another phrase we all know yourself. The text looks at how we usually understand that. Typically, it means gathering information about yourself, right? Like a carpenter learns about wood.
Yeah, we think of it like building up a profile, accumulating data points, past experiences, personality quirks, habits. This is me.
But the text offers a totally different angle. It points out that the self, it isn't a static thing you can pin down like that. It's constantly in motion, changing, acting, reacting. It's never still.
And yet, we often create this static image of who we think we are based on all that accumulated history, and then we operate from that image, don't we? Rather than from the living, moving reality of who we are right now.
So knowing yourself, according to this source, isn't about collecting facts about you. It's about being aware of that constant movement, that flux, with complete attention, observing the process itself, not trying to solidify it into a definition.
Okay, but how do you even do that? How do you observe this constant inner movement? Where do you stand to watch it? The text gives us a really important tool here, the mirror of relationship.
Yes, it puts it very clearly. It says, you can only truly see yourself in relationship with another person. That interaction acts like a dynamic mirror. It shows you actually as you are, your instant reactions, your hidden motives, your automatic defenses and conflicts.
But it also adds a warning, right? If that mirror itself, the relationship gets clouded by your images of the relationship or your images of the other person, then that also leads straight back to illusion.
Exactly. So it requires being present to the actual interaction, the give and take, not just your preconceived ideas about it.
Which brings us back full circle almost to this idea of complete attention. What does that really mean in practice? The text uses the simple act of listening as an example.
It's not just registering the sound waves of the words hitting your ears. It's hearing the fullness of the meaning, the whole content behind the word with your entire being, using all your energy, nerves, ears, eyes, your whole focus just on that act of perception.
Total listening.
Total listening. And here's maybe the most radical idea in the whole text. When there is this complete attention, this total listening, there's no longer a sense of me who is attending. There's no center, no observer standing apart from the act of attention. There's only attention itself.
Wow. No little person inside looking out, just the state of attention. And the text links this pretty breathtaking idea back to that possibility of constant alertness we started with. It suggests that alertness comes not from trying really hard to pay attention from some fixed me, but from deeply understanding the nature of thought itself, this whole image-making process we've been discussing.
So yeah, we've taken quite a journey. From that core question, we looked at thought and image as tools, then imagination as both creative force and potential trap. We explored awareness without choice, reimagined what knowing yourself might mean, seeing the movement, not collecting data, We saw relationship as the vital mirror for that observation, and finally landed on this profound idea about complete attention potentially dissolving the observer.
So the key takeaway really pulled from this text is that this state, this constant alertness, this ability to see the line between necessary thought and illusion, it is possible. But maybe it arises not from effort, from the me trying, but from a really penetrating understanding. And maybe even, as you said, the dissolution of that me in the state of complete attention.
And understanding these dynamics, seeing how these processes work within you, hopefully gives you a kind of map, a way to navigate that constant flow of information, both external and internal, maybe with a bit more clarity about what's actual and what's just the play of images.
Absolutely. And this whole exploration, this deep dive, was possible because you, our listener, brought this fascinating source material and this frankly vital question to us. So thank you.
Yeah, really engaging directly with texts like this, seeing how they dissect concepts we think we know, like attention or the self.
Hmm.
It's incredibly valuable, I think.
Definitely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with, something to chew on, drawn right from the source. If, as the text suggests, in complete attention, there is no me attending, only attention, what does that actually change about how you think about yourself, about the person you feel yourself to be, even right now listening? Something to sit with.